Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate this opportunity to highlight to my colleagues what exactly is happening in New York City as a result of Joe Biden's manufactured open borders policy and the crisis that is created in terms of a migrant crisis in New York City. This morning, a lot of New Yorkers woke up to the news that 2 of our NYPD officers were attacked by a mob of migrants. It's outrageous to think that individuals who came to this country and claimed to be innocent asylum seekers would attack our police officers. That disrespect is unbelievable. But sadly, it is not the only time we've seen crimes like this taking place. Now let's remember, the individuals that are coming through the southern border are paying thousands of dollars to the drug cartels to be smuggled here. My mayor is further incentivizing this by offering housing, food, health care, education, legal services, laundry services, you name it. The taxpayers are paying to house those individuals who attack those police officers. But that's not all we're seeing happen. Let me show you a few headlines from recently. All in New York. An illegal immigrant bites off police sergeant's finger after a DUI, driving while intoxicated, bust. 4 migrants arrested for stealing more than $12,000 in goods from Long Island's Macy's. New York City migrant pickpocketing teams are the newest headache for the NYPD. Asylum seeker accused of killing another at Randall's Island migrant shelter. A migrant woman arrested after slapping an NYPD cop. Migrant stabbed by girlfriend in a possible love triangle. And migrants are behind the boom in New York City's red light district. Eric Adams, Democratic mayor, says. Democratic mayor is also saying that this is destroying New York City. We're seeing New York City struggle to pay for this crisis that Joe Biden, again, once created with his executive orders, 60 policy changes he made from the Trump administration that made our border wide open. And Chuck Schumer and the Senate refused to do anything. They refused to pass our bill, H.R. 2, which would end this crisis today. I called ICE this morning and I said, I want these individuals deported. The ones that are committing crimes like attacking our police officers. Can we at least agree as Democrats, Independents, and Republicans that we should not tolerate that? But what also really concerns me is that we've caught hundreds of people on the terror watch list at our border. The fact that me, as a New Yorker from a post 9/11 world, that we have to question that there are 1.8 million people that have totally evaded law enforcement. In fact, Customs and Border Patrol union leader today told us it's probably more like 4 million. That's on top of the 8 million or so that have come, paid the cartels to come in here and claimed asylum. We're not even talking about those people who turned themselves in. We're talking about the 4 million gotaways. We don't know who they are, where they are, what their intentions are, and that should concern every single person in this body, particularly the President of the United States. TSA is allowing individuals to board planes without identification, like the American citizens have to provide when they board planes. They can use a detainer, they could use a warrant for their arrest, all sorts of other documents that are probably produced, by the way, from fake identification that they use to come over the border. That is directly against the 9/11 Commission recommendations. And the last thing I just want to talk about is that New York City is complicit because they are not complying with detainer requests. ICE is trying to do some of its job when these people commit crimes. NYPD arrests them, they release them back onto the street. Why? Because they're forced to by the democratic policies put in place by my city and my state. That's unfortunate. So now, when these 2 individuals attacked the police officers, they were arrested, but they were released back onto the street. They weren't detained to be sent to deportation. In fact, now ICE has to try to go out and find them with no cooperation from local law enforcement because Democrats in New York have tied their hands. That is unconscionable, it is unsafe, and we have to make sure that the Democrats here, the Democrats over in the Senate and the president stop playing with fire, because it's a dangerous situation. As you know, our ally in Israel is being attacked by terrorists. Iran is making threats against us that they're going to commit attacks against us on our own soil. We have them attacking American soldiers at 160 different posts in the Middle East. We saw 3 soldiers killed by Iran proxies the other day. And we're going to keep this border open like this? It's unconscionable to me, and I expect action from the Senate. And 1.8 million people, allowing them to continue to pay the cartels to come in, that's not border security. So we expect them to either pass our bill, Border Security Act, or pass something that's reasonable so we can have a real discussion and debate and seal this border and make our country secure once and for all. I yield back.
Thank you. I now
thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague, Anthony D'Esposito. And thank you for your service, Anthony, and for highlighting the dangers that our law enforcement face each and every day. As a representative from New York City, it breaks my heart to see that we are losing police officers year after year, not just to retirements and those who are fleeing our state, but those who are being murdered by criminals who should not be on our streets. We talked about how 374 police officers have been killed in the line of duty since Joe Biden became president in 2021. That includes 5 of our brave NYPD. Detective Sakos, Detective Rivera, Detective Mora, Officer Fayez, and of course the latest being Officer Jonathan Diller. We must listen to the words and the pleas of their widows, of their parents, of their family members, of their fellow law enforcement officers who are saying that this is preventable. And if we see that our police officers are not safe in cities like ours, how can the public be safe? It's truly tragic because we know it's preventable. And there are a certain number of laws that the state legislature in New York have put in place that have caused this crisis. The individuals who were responsible for the death of Officer Diller, they were career criminals. Guy Rivera, who is the one who pulled the trigger, he had 21 prior arrests, and he was still on our streets. He was most recently released from a 5-year prison stint for a drug conviction, and then he went off to parole in 2022. But he was on the streets because of a new law that the legislature passed called Less is More Act. He had parole violations, but he wasn't in jail. And that's because of the actions of our governor and the state legislature. His partner, the other perp, was arrested at least 14 times for things like robbery, assault, even attempted murder in 2001. He was sentenced to a decade behind bars, but guess what? He's back on the street, and in April, he was caught with a loaded illegal gun. The DA sought bail, but the judge agreed on bail, but not for monitoring. And so he made the bail and was released back onto our streets again. It is so tragic to see that these laws put in place by our legislature have caused the death of these police officers, but New Yorkers are being hurt each and every day by people who have not a dozen, not 2 dozen, not 3 dozen, sometimes even 4 dozen prior arrests, and they are still on the streets because of the revolving door. We just heard of another cop who was hospitalized last week after being attacked by 6 migrants at a Target in the Upper East Side. Once again, lawlessness is taking over the streets of New York City. And what you're seeing taking place is a combination of the policies of this president, open border policies, the policies of our left-leaning state legislature with the bail reform, the raise the age, as well as the Less and More Act, and couple it with the city policy that handcuffs the NYPD and doesn't allow for any cooperation for individuals who are committing crimes to be deported or at least detained. If ICE makes a detainer request for these individuals, which they have, the city won't comply. They'll just release them back on the street so they can continue wreaking havoc in our city, in our country. That is wrong. And it's not going to stop. We're not going to bring public safety to the streets of the city or this country unless we change these policies. And so the left-leaning Democrats who continue to vote for these policies, support these policies, refuse to repeal or even adjust or fix these policies, we're speaking to you tonight. And we are echoing what the widows and the children and the parents and the family members and the community where these police officers are and the millions of crime victims we are seeing across our country reside. They want action, they want it now, and we must continue to fight for it, and we won't stop until we get cooperation from the other side of the aisle. Thank you. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the question, how many more Americans must die before President Joe Biden reverses the 60-plus policies that he put in place that led to our border being wide open? We know that under Sections 1182 and 1225 of Title VIII of immigration law, the President has the authority to secure the border and uses discretion to implement policies. Sadly, the President has used his discretion instead to completely dismantle our southern border, allowing for dangerous gang members, criminals, smugglers, and illegal immigrants to enter. Right now, the President can end catch and release. He can reinstate remain in Mexico. He can make changes to asylum and parole. He can expedite removal of individuals. He can shut down the border altogether, and he can cut off funding to nonprofit organizations, non-government partners who are basically allowing people to travel all around our country. Again, sadly, President Biden used these authorities instead to dismantle the policies of President Trump. As a result, we've seen so many Americans being killed. They've come over our border, illegal immigrants, and I'll read you some of the headlines. And this is just from this year alone. Illegal immigrant from El Salvador charged with murder and shootout that killed 2-year-old boy, injured teen mom. Venezuelan illegal immigrant charged with sexual assault against 14-year-old in Virginia. ICE confirms that a Georgia student murder suspect entered U.S. illegally and was previously arrested in New York City. 5-time deported illegal alien accused of killing 10-year-old boy walking home from school. Honduran illegal migrant arrested for rape of girl, 14. Stabbing man during knife-point robbery. Illegal migrant charged in Michigan woman's killing was deported under Trump but snuck back in, according to ICE. Illegal immigrant deported 8 times with 11 arrests, now charged with murder in Ohio. These are just some of the victims of President Biden's open border policy. If we go into last year, we can talk more about an illegal immigrant who had an outstanding warrant for attempted strangulation, approached a car and shot a woman 7 times because she wouldn't hang up the phone when he asked her to. An illegal immigrant was charged with sadistically murdering a 16-year-old Texas high school, stabbing her to death and dumping her body in the bathtub, and her body was discovered by her mother. An illegal alien released by the Biden administration was arrested for raping an 11-year-old girl, strangling her to death after knocking on the door of her home. An illegal who entered our country under the Biden administration was charged with driving a minivan into a school bus full of children, flipping the bus and killing an 11-year-old boy. An illegal alien repeatedly stabbed and mutilated individuals and then dumped them in a field in Daytona Beach, Florida. And an illegal immigrant was arrested for murdering a 57-year-old, a mother of 3, and a grandmother of 4 in Texas. This is a 5-minute speech. I'm only allowed 5 minutes, or else I can go on and on and on. So again, I will ask, how many more murders of Americans, whether it be by stabbings, drunk driving, shootings, or fentanyl, will it take before the president reverses his dangerous policies at our southern border? Or the Senate takes up our legislation, H.R. 2, the Border Security Act, which would require him to take action at the border. Giving the president a little more discretion, as the Senate has suggested, is not going to resolve the issue because the president is not using the discretion he currently has. We need to require him to take these actions to reinstate the policies of the previous administration that were working, common sense policies, and stop this president from giving parole to individuals who are dangerous gang members, who are wreaking havoc in cities like mine in New York. I yield back. Thank you very much.
Gentlewoman yields back.
Historic achievements today. Mr. Speaker, I also rise as a New York City representative in a post-9/11 world to talk about how concerned I am that our border is not secure. Since Joe Biden took office, CBP has encountered at least 340 individuals on the terrorist watch list along the southern border or in our interior. I just want to give you some examples. An Afghan migrant on the terror watch list spent nearly 1 year inside the United States after he was apprehended and released by CBP agents in March of 2023. He was processed at the border. CBP released him without alerting ICE officials about potential terrorism ties, and he was free to fly domestically in the United States. He was arrested in February 2024, then released by immigration judge in March, who was not told that he was a national security risk. Last month, an illegal immigrant from Lebanon caught at the border admitted to CBP that he was a member of Hezbollah and was headed to New York to try to make a bomb. In February of 2024, ICE apprehended another terrorist who was allowed to roam in the U.S. for nearly a year after crossing the border illegally, and the terrorist was a member of Al-Shabaab that was only arrested after ICE became aware of his threat to national security. And in February, a Colombian man on the terror watch list was caught crossing into Eagle Pass area. In August of last year, it was discovered that a smuggler with ISIS ties helped more than a dozen Uzbek migrants into the United States over the southern border. And in April 2021, CBP announced that they had arrested 2 Yemeni men on the terror watch list in separate incidents as they attempted to illegally cross the southern border in California, and they were both on no-fly lists. Again, we've caught at least 340 individuals, either at the border or in the interior. But the more concerning number is who did we not catch? We know that nearly 2 million people, estimated by CBP, have entered this country without any encounter by government or law enforcement. We don't know who they are, where they are, or what their intentions are. And that comes down to about 800 individuals a day. We need to secure our border, particularly with growing threats from Iran, who said they want to commit an attack on our own soil, Russia, China. And if we're going to send our allies money, which we should support our allies, we need to ensure that our own homeland is secure against these threats as well. Even the FBI director is confirming that joint terrorism task forces in all 56 of FBI's field offices are occupied with threats coming across our border. It's unconscionable to me that the president refuses to reverse any of his 60-plus, more than 60 border policies that he changed via executive order, and unconscionable to me that Senator Schumer refuses to work with us to force the president, because the president has discretion, right? He put these policies in place to begin with. He can reverse them. Senator Schumer should work with us to force the president to reverse these policies. And I believe our speaker needs to go back to Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and say, if we're going to pass foreign aid, we must have at least at least a few common sense border protection measures in there. And I don't think it's that hard to ask from Republicans or Democrats to say, at least let's prohibit individuals who are gangs, terrorists, or criminals from entering into this country. Thank you. I yield back.
Chair recognizes.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to point out that New York State has never seen a tax that it does not like. Sadly, in New York, we're once again looking at a $15 cash grab to enter Manhattan City Center, affecting constituents of mine in Staten Island and Brooklyn, shifting traffic to the outer boroughs of New York City, and of course, hurting our economy when we are trying to get back on our feet post-COVID. It's unconscionable that the Biden administration rubber-stamped the congestion pricing cash grab of the MTA at the request of Governor Kathy Hochul without even requiring an environmental impact statement as required by federal law. The NEPA process is clear, and this is a clear violation, which is why myself and others, including some in this chamber, have sued to try to stop this cash grab. We call on the Biden administration to reverse course. Do not allow this toll to go through. You're hurting the people of New York State. You're hurting New York City's center, which is an economic engine for the entire country, and I hope my colleagues will join my legislation to stop it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, I woke up to a press conference being held by my mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, and our police commissioner. And they were saying that while we were sleeping, 2 NYPD officers were shot. And they were shot by somebody who is in this country illegally. Somebody who entered via Eagle Pass, somebody who is a national of Venezuela, somebody who is allowed to be here because of President Biden's 60 policy changes that have opened up our border, allowing dangerous individuals to enter. Someone who is in New York City being housed, being fed, having legal services, laundry services, free Metro cards, health care on the taxpayers, the hardworking taxpayers that I represent in New York. The policies of the left are destroying this country. They are destroying our city. They are destroying the rule of law. This was totally preventable. It is something that should not have occurred. Thankfully, those police officers are okay. But it sheds light that the failed policies of the Democrats on the federal, state, and local level have come to a head. And this is the result. Our law enforcement, those tasked to protect us, are being hurt. Chuck Schumer, on the other side of the building, represents New York. He still will not take up any of the pieces of legislation that we passed in this House, some with bipartisan support, to deport individuals who are here committing crimes, to take action, to undo the policies of President Biden. Just last week, there was another individual that committed murder, another illegal immigrant that was here, committed murder in Harlem. And yet these 2 incidences, one in Queens, one in Harlem, both districts represented by colleagues here in the House who are on the other side of the aisle, where are they? I don't see them putting pressure on Senator Schumer to pass meaningful legislation to undo what President Biden did by executive order, has the ability to undo it. And the president continues to lie to the American people, telling them that he doesn't have the authority to do anything at the border. He had the authority to break the border, right? He himself passed those 60 policy changes. He himself can fix it. So I speak today because the American people need to see what's going on. They need to know that this is a direct result of this president's policies, of my mayor's policy that we're going to continue housing individuals, converting hotels in New York that should be going to tourists, instead they're going to these illegal immigrants that are wreaking havoc. The person was stopped, by the way, the person that shot these officers, because he was suspect in a ring of robberies. He and others using motorized scooters to terrorize the community, commit robberies, pickpocketing, snatching purses. Why is my mayor forcing we the people, the taxpayers, to house individuals who are committing crimes? And the New York City Council, also run by radical leftists, they prohibit NYPD from cooperating with Immigration and Customs Enforcement to deport individuals once they're arrested. We've had thousands of arrests of people in this country illegally. And guess what? They go back to their luxury hotel room that we, the people, are paying for. Because the New York City Council doesn't think we should be cooperating to have them removed from this country. So we leave them there to be able to commit crimes over and over again. People 8, 9, 10, if you read, New York Post does a good job of exposing it. People with multiple arrests being released back on the street to prey on New Yorkers. This is completely unacceptable. And Chuck Schumer has to stop hiding behind a bill that nobody likes and wouldn't do the job. He needs to actually hold this president accountable. Let's undo those 60 executive orders if the president won't do it on his own. But we have a responsibility to protect the people of New York, to protect the people of this country, to protect the taxpayers of the United States, and to secure our borders. Enough is enough. Let's get it done, Senator Schumer. Do something meaningful over there in the Senate. Pass some of the bills that we passed here with bipartisan support.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, 8 suspected terrorists with ISIS ties were arrested in New York City, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia after crossing our southern border from Tajikistan, where they supposedly were vetted and then released into our interior. Since President Biden took office, 340 individuals on the terror watch list were caught crossing, and that's just who were caught. Who else is among the 10 million individuals that this administration has allowed to enter after making its 60 different policy changes to undo the border security measures of President Trump? Well, we know he's allowed in drug traffickers, murderers, robbers, those who have assaulted police officers, and even an individual who shot 2 police officers in New York City a week ago. How many more before President Biden takes action and undoes his disastrous policies, and how many more until cities like mine undo their dangerous sanctuary policies that not only protect these individuals, but force the taxpayers of New York and America to house them and provide all sorts of free services to their benefit? I yield back.
Objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago, a 13-year-old girl was raped in New York City by an illegal immigrant from Ecuador released into our country by Border Patrol thanks to Joe Biden's open border policies. In Texas, 12-year-old Jocelyn Nangeri was raped and murdered by 2 illegal immigrants from Venezuela, again released into our country at the direction of the Biden administration. Laken Riley's killer, a Venezuelan gang member, was granted parole by the Biden administration, then repeatedly arrested and released by Sanctuary City, New York, the only reason Laken is not alive today. Rachel Morin's killer, an illegal immigrant from El Salvador, crossed Biden's open border, successfully evading CP custody. And Kayla Hamilton's killer from El Salvador was allowed to enter by the Biden administration despite associations with the violent MS-13 gang. I rise today to ask how many more American women and girls will suffer the same fate before President Biden reverses his policies, and where are our colleagues on this other side of the aisle that claim to be champions of women? Mr. Speaker, if anyone is wondering why we need a bill requiring proof of citizenship to vote, look no further than my home, New York City, where in 2021, the City Council under Mayor Bill de Blasio passed legislation allowing non-citizens who've resided in our city for just 30 days to vote in municipal elections. Not only this, but in November, after our office obtained copies of migrant shelter contracts by Freedom of Information law requests, we discovered that New York City included a provision requiring contractors to distribute voter registration forms, assist in voter registration, and promote campaign material within the shelter themselves, all while prohibiting city agencies from asking about citizenship status in the same contract. As a daughter of immigrants who came to this nation legally and earned their right to vote, I've joined city and state leaders as a plaintiff in a lawsuit to stop New York City's misguided voting law. We've won not once, twice. However, we continue to fight because the city continues to waste taxpayer money dollars to appeal the ruling. This is why we need this bill today, and I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
The gentleman